Hello everyone, good afternoon to all of you. I am thrilled to welcome you all to our scientific session on the latest update in carbapenem resistance Acinetobacter baumannii. We are honored to have Dr. Neha Gupta as our speaker and Dr. Anand Nikalji sir as the moderator. Dr. Anand Nikalji sir is the director of MCRI ICU and associate professor. Have a seat. Dr. Neha Gupta, on the other hand, has completed her FNB ID in the first batch of India, and she is the founder of NG Swastha, that is the first dedicated ID specialist clinic in North India. Let's give a warm welcome to our speakers and make this season a great one. Thank you.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much for taking out time here. I'm Dr. Neha Gupta. It's a pleasure and honor to be here, and I thank the organizers. It's really nice to meet you as well. And in fact, it's good to hear that you are very close to Dr. Bharat Purandre, who has been really instrumental in me guiding to join infectious diseases. And I'm blessed to get trained under Dr. Rajiv Soman sir. You all must have heard him prior. So today we are going to discuss regarding the Acinetobacter infections. So I'm sure all of us here are critical care specialists, right? Okay. So that's me. NG Swastha is our initiative in Gurgaon. And we are going to discuss the practical approach to the Acinetobacter infections today. And I'm going to discuss when should we suspect the Acinetobacter infections? What is the mechanism of resistance in Acinetobacter, especially in India, which we encounter? Then how do we diagnose? What are the various lab criteria, susceptibility breakpoints? And of course, how do we clinically interpret a culture report where it is positive for the Acinetobacter? Which antibiotic should we use? Should we use a monotherapy for Acinetobacter or should we use combination therapy? And which antibiotics should be used? What are the novel treatment options? And which combination can be used for the treatment of the difficult Acinetobacter infections? So, I will start with this case. This is a 77-year-old gentleman who's a diabetic, has coronary artery disease, has immune-mediated myositis, and was admitted with aspiration pneumonia and required invasive ventilation. So it was a very severe pneumonia. And we can see the X-ray, which shows bilateral infiltrates. The sputum is positive with particular ground stain. The biofile has also detected an organism, which is 10 to the power of 7. And the resistance gene detected is NDM. Which of the following in this patient who is presented with severe pneumonia is least likely? With Staph aureus? And why are we saying that? Gram stain, what is it showing? Gram negative, absolutely, very good. And what is also special about this? Can you actually say a little further whether can gram stain, gram negative, absolutely right? Coco bacilli, yes, that's correct. So we need good diagnostics, and the rapid diagnostics for the gram stain gives us a clue towards the possible pathogen. So this was a gram negative Coco bacilli, and of course the culture subsequently grew Acinetobacter, and the biofile had also detected Acinetobacter baumannii with NTM resistance. The Acinetobacter infections are very common cause of the nosocomial infections, and in fact, most of the time we see them as the nosocomial, but very rarely. It can also result in community-acquired pneumonia, especially when it is in tropical regions and who have been colonized with the Acinetobacter prior. So this is one of the data. So what is the likely percentage of Acinetobacter bloodstream infections in your ICU? Any one of you? I can see the two young ladies here. What is the percentage of the blood cultures? You don't see blood culture positive? Okay, you're from which hospital? Okay, great, wonderful. So that means the infection control practices are excellent. Anyone from the adult ICU? You do see, ma'am? Yeah.
Yeah. 5 to 10% patients.
5 to 10%, right? Yeah, absolutely. So the Western literature says that 1 to 2% of the bloodstream infections is Acinetobacter. But in India, it is variable. And as you rightly put it, 5%. Even in this particular data, which is a little while back, sometime back, here we can see that the Acinetobacter baumannii complex is 5%. So usually in India it will be 5 to 10%, as rightly mentioned, will vary from center to center, and also it will keep on varying from within the same center from ICU to ICU, depending upon the patients as well as the infection control practices. So when we talk about the Acinetobacter infections, Acinetobacter is basic. There are so many species in Acinetobacter. Predominantly, we have 5 major species which cause human infections, and the most common is Acinetobacter baumannii, which causes 80% of the infections. Then we also have, we all are hearing about this Acinetobacter baumannii calcoaceticus complex, right? This calcoaceticus is predominantly found in the soil and water. It is non-pathogenic, but all this, like Acinetobacter baumannii, is the predominant cause. If a patient is in the ICU, and even they can colonize the healthy skin, the respiratory tract, and subsequently cause infections, they can survive for a long period of time, for weeks, and it's important to focus on the infection control practices. Can cause infections, both local as well as systemic infections can be caused. So what are the syndromes, and when should we suspect? So when should we suspect is obviously in patients who are in the ICU for a long period of time, who have got invasive catheters, mechanical ventilation, prior antibiotic therapy, or has also they are at home care facilities. And what are the various syndromes which can be caused by Acinetobacter? So we have bacteremia, but the most common is the pneumonia, HAP and the VAP. Blood culture positive, especially if there is a line, then sudden onset, sepsis can occur. Chronic wounds, if a person has got operated chronic wounds following surgery, that can be colonized with Acinetobacter. Meningitis, CSF shunt infections, and osteomyelitis, in fact bone and joint infections can also occur with the Acinetobacter. If there is a urinary procedure which has been done, any nephrostomy, then also UTI is also possible. So, but remember that a prior nosocomial procedure is a very important factor. If you have a culture positive in a patient who is coming from the community, has no intervention done, then it is likely a contamination, not a true infection. Some colonization of course occurs, so you can have colonization of the respiratory tract, the wounds, as well as sometimes the GI can also get colonized. Now, if a patient is in the ICU, is there any history of the antibiotics which can give us a clue that yes, this can be now Acinetobacter infections? So when a patient presents to the ICU, and the patient will be on antibiotics, if a patient is becoming septic on a particular set of antibiotic, that can give us a clue, because we should always remember that which are the bugs which are not being covered by the current antibiotic therapy. So most commonly, of course, we are using ceftazidime, avibactam and astronam combination in our ICUs. If a patient is becoming septic on that, then Acinetobacter needs to be thought of because it is not covered. Hello, sir. Hi. Pleasure. Thank you. I'm taking it very basic. I know all of you are experts, but I'm just taking it very basic here. So there is a list of of the organisms which are not covered by the antibiotics. And when we talk about, say, for example, if a patient is on meropenem, then you have to think about either a carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae, carbapenem-resistant Pseudomonas, Acinetobacter, Candida, or even a gram-positive infection. That needs to be thought of.
Yeah.
So which other antibiotics? For example, if you're talking about so we already have ertapenem, as we know, that is intrinsically resistant. It does not cover Pseudomonas and Acinetobacter. Ceftazidime avibactam I mentioned. And of course we have this phosphomycin also has no activity against the Acinetobacter baumannii. Now, Gram Spain, as I just mentioned, definitely gives us a clue. And if the culture is positive, we can request our lab to tell us whether it is a lactose fermenting bacteria or a non-lactose fermenting. Non-lactose fermenting, again, we will have Pseudomonas, Stenotrophomonas and Acinetobacter baumannii. Whereas if it is lactose fermenting, it will become the Enterobacteriaceae, like the common E. coli as well as the Klebsiella pneumoniae. Now moving to the mechanism of resistance and understanding it, because Acinetobacter baumannii is difficult to treat because of the huge resistance which we are seeing. This is a data from the back, from some time back, and among the various gram negatives, it is the Acinetobacter baumannii which is far ahead in resistance. The carbapenem resistance is 85%, whereas even for the Klebsiella pneumoniae, it is to the tune of 60 to 80%, depending upon institute to institute. So what are the various mechanisms of resistance in case of Acinetobacter baumannii? Which is the most common cause for resistance among the Acinetobacter? For gram negatives, most common is the beta lactamases, and for gram positive, which is the most common? Alteration in the penicillin binding proteins. And why is that? Because the structure of the gram positive and gram negative is completely different. We have a very thick peptide cell wall, which is the peptidoglycan in case of gram positive, and in case of gram negative, this peptidoglycan is thin. We have an outer lipopolysaccharide membrane and an inner, as we can see here, the inner membrane, and there is this periplasmic space where there are beta lactamases. And it is this beta lactamases which confer resistance to the gram negatives. And it is also the most common cause for resistance in case of Acinetobacter baumannii. Now, there are, if we look at the Acinetobacter beta lactamases, there is intrinsic resistance to the class A beta lactamases, which confers resistance to the first penicillins, first and second generation cephalosporins, and then there is acquired resistance. There is ESBLs, OXA and NDM, and of course the AMC, very rare in case of Acinetobacter. When we talk about the oxacillinases, which oxa is commonly seen in our practice? Oxa 48, which we see in the Klebsiella pneumoniae. And in case of Acinetobacter, which is the oxacillinase? 23 and 51. 51 is the other one which is common in India particularly. And of course we are seeing NDMs as well in case of Acinetobacter. Now besides this, besides the beta lactamases, there are other mechanisms of resistance, and this makes Acinetobacter very, very resistant. And what are these? So this includes, there is going to be overexpression of the efflux pumps, which confers resistance to the other class of antibiotics, including the quinolones, to the aminoglycosides, tetracyclines, which includes the minocycline and the tigecycline, chloramphenicol, And there can be these loss of pore-in channels because of this OMP-AB, which is predominantly for the Acinetobacter, which decreases the penetration of the antibiotics, conferring resistance to the beta-lactams as well as to the carbapenems. And it is this loss of pore-in channels which is responsible for the carbapenem heteroresistance as well. There is antibiotic modifying enzymes which confer resistance to the aminoglycosides, and the resistance among the polymyxin B as well, which is close to 5% in our country, 5 to 10%, and that is because of this PMR-A and PMR-B, which, what does it do? It decreases the lipopolysaccharide synthesis, which results in a less negative charge, so it attracts the antibiotic less, and that is why the activity or resistance develops. This, I'm sure all of us must have seen a lot of times. Acinetobacter baumannii predominantly has OXA23, whereas the other OXA48 and OXA48-like are seen in the Klebsiella pneumoniae as well as the other Enterobacteriaceae. The clinical implication is, we will discuss that. The other oxacillinases, which are predominantly seen in Acinetobacter baumannii, include OXA23, 51, then we have 24, 58, 143 and 235. And this is one of the data regarding the resistance in case of Acinetobacter. This is from Dr. Balaji and group from CMC Vellore. Carbapenem resistance close to 70%, colistin less than 5, mutations in the PMR-A and B responsible for the same. Now coming to the diagnosis, and let's discuss the labs, the susceptibility breakpoints, as well as the clinical interpretation of the cultures here. A lot of times we all are performing this particular test in our ICUs, which is this rapid CRO detection or the expert Carba-R. How many of us are doing it? Great. So the rest are not doing. How many of us doing it? Yeah, more and more. Which of these mechanisms is not detected by this particular test? OXA23 is not detected, absolutely. So the point is, suppose you have a GNB, because this can also be done directly from the positive blood cultures. If we do it from the positive blood cultures, ideally we should do first a gram stain, or if a MALDI-TOF is available, identify whether it's a likely Enterobacteriaceae or a Pseudomonas or Acinetobacter. Suppose this is done on a GNB, and if the resistance is not detected, then either it's a susceptible or it could be Acinetobacter. That can be missed in the expert Carba-R. We are aware of these various diagnostic assays which can be used for detecting a positive, the mechanism of resistance. So we have the expert Carba-R, which can be done, and it detects the 5 major carbapenemases, but it just detects the mechanism of resistance, doesn't identify the bacteria. The BCID panel, again it's off. Okay. The BCID panel can detect the species, and however it does not detect the OXA23, and the various biofire assays, they also don't detect the OXA23. Now what has happened? I think I'll use that itself. Let's use that. So we have the susceptibility breakpoints, and do we have susceptibility breakpoints for the carbapenems for the Acinetobacter? Yes, we do. Carbapenems, yes. What about the TG-cycline susceptibility breakpoints for the Acinetobacter baumannii? And colistin? Colistin, we have the breakpoints, but it is not susceptible. It is always going to be intermediate. And as we can see here, so for the TG-cycline, the Acinetobacter baumannii, as we can see, there is no susceptibility breakpoint as per the CLSI or the UCAST. So sometimes some labs may not check for it, but there are FDA breakpoints for the tigecycline. So this can be used or extrapolated. So this is one of the caveats for the susceptibility of tigecycline for the Acinetobacter baumannii. Now I'll move on to this particular case. This is a patient who had a road traffic accident, and then the pus culture was positive. It was carbapenem resistant and colistin was intermediate. CES is the ceftriaxone EDTA sulbactam, which was reported as susceptible. Now subsequently he underwent debridement. There was a second debridement which was also done and which grew Acinetobacter baumannii, which was reported as carbapenem resistant with susceptibility to tigecycline. The minocycline was resistant, colistin was intermediate, and however this patient was not given any anti-specific Acinetobacter baumannii treatment, was not given. Subsequently another debridement and cultures were positive and graft was also done, and there was a subsequent graft failure. Now this is the wound of the patient. He had an amputation which was done and it looked like this, and this is the Acinetobacter baumannii which is isolated. So what would you do? This is a chronic wound which is persistently growing Acinetobacter baumannii. Would you treat or not treat? Would you treat or not? Chronic wounds can be colonized. In fact, earlier it was thought that it is a colonizer. The treating physician thought that and did not treat. But in chronic wounds where there is clinically also the wound looks bad, there has been graft failure. So it is a very likely pathogen and should be treated. And this is what we thought, that it should be treated. And there are several factors which we look into before we try whether it's a colonization or a true infection. So depending upon the site of infection as well as the clinical status of the wound, and also from whether it is a blood sample, it's a urine sample, or it's a chronic wound. So a sterile site or a non-sterile site, and also the clinical status, we decide whether the pathogen is a colonization or a true infection. Now in this patient, if we have to treat, what should we do? Should we use which of the following should be used, or which we should treat? How should we treat this infection? With the polymyxin B, with meropenem combination therapy, tigecycline, with colistin, as we know that tigecycline is susceptible here, tigecycline with sulbactam, tigecycline with colistin. Okay, and why are you saying that? Why not this combination therapy of polymyxin with meropenem? You're right. Yeah, I'm just...
It is. MIC is more than 16 with meropenem.
Absolutely, yes. So for Acinetobacter, in fact, if the MIC is more than 16, combination therapy is not recommended. It is always the exposure. In fact, it is the overuse of carbapenems or the exposure to carbapenems which is responsible for the carbapenem resistant Acinetobacter. And then what about the polymyxin B or the polymyxins? Alone? TG alone is not recommended? Okay, and why this TG actually achieves very good concentration into the skin and soft tissue. But yes, there is, as we have seen, that even the susceptibility breakpoints from the CLSI and UCAST are not mentioned. Especially if it is skin and soft tissue, depending upon the severity of illness, we can try it, but definitely not for the bacteremia or for the pneumonia because of the limited penetration and low serum concentrations. Tigecycline with colistin is what you mentioned. So even I decided to treat with tigecycline and colistin in this patient, and So a combination therapy, definite. So how do we choose? Basically, the choice will depend upon the severity of illness, and it will also depend upon the risk of resistance which we are encountering in our clinical practice. So if it is not very critically ill patient and we are not seeing resistance, the IDSA recommends that monotherapy is fine. But in our scenario, we are seeing resistance, and of course, this is a critical care all of us are practicing that. So here a combination therapy is needed in our country. Coming to the treatment options, here, as Madam rightly mentioned, tigecycline and colistin is what even I started. This is one, why am I presenting this particular case is because this is a non-critically ill patient, and it is during this course I realized that probably just using tigecycline is not sufficient as well, and I will tell you. So initially when we started with the tigecycline and colistin, within 2-3 days, unfortunately, this patient developed nephrotoxicity. Colistin, we all know, is nephrotoxic, but this was a not critically ill patient. This was at home, he was a healthy, normal creatinine, but still there was a nephrotoxicity. Creatinine jumped to 2.8 and he was having a lot of nausea as well as vomiting. So I had to stop colistin, and we continued only with the tigecycline here. Now, tigecycline was continued. Meanwhile, he also had superadded infection with the Candida auris, for which we initiated micafungin. And the tigecycline was continued, but on 26 Jan, while the patient is on tigecycline with a skin and soft tissue infection, the CRAB is again positive. So this patient again had culture positive for Acinetobacter baumannii while on tigecycline. And at this point, since he had been on colistin with nephrotoxicity, that is not an option. So that's why we started the patient on ampicillin. You mentioned ampicillin or Selvactam alone? Selvactam alone, absolutely. So we started this patient on Selvactam, and of course the tigecycline was continued. So this is an example of a patient who is not critically ill. In critically ill patients where there is so many changes in the volume of distribution, protein binding, augmented renal clearance, and there is an impact on achieving good levels of the antibiotics, beta-lactams, polymyxins. For sites which are difficult to treat, like the pneumonia or the bacteremia, using colistin or tigecycline alone is not a good option for us, and we need novel options for the treatment. And we are going to discuss those. So we have just discussed about tigecycline. Tigecycline, the limitation is that it has a very good volume of distribution, but the serum concentration is less. So the other tetracycline is the minocycline, right? And we have been using minocycline. Minocycline, the advantage is that the serum concentration of minocycline is higher than the tigecycline. The current recommendation for the doses are 200 milligrams 12 hourly. It has well-defined clinical breakpoints for susceptibility as well as resistance for the Acinetobacter baumannii. And most importantly, we need to, a lot of labs may not give us the susceptibility to minocycline. So if suppose you have susceptibility to tigecycline, then minocycline is likely going to be susceptible. If minocycline is resistant, then tigecycline may be susceptible or resistant. And that is why specific susceptibilities to both these agents are needed from our microbiology friends. This we have just mentioned that they are differences in the minocycline and the tigecycline pharmacokinetics and the dynamics. The concentration, the serum concentration is far better with the minocycline as compared to the tigecycline. And it achieves a higher concentration into the skin and also a very good concentration into the lungs. Concentration is better than the tigecycline. And also, so if you have a patient with Acinetobacter baumannii, bacteremia or lung infection, and if you have minocycline susceptible, then a combination therapy of minocycline with another agent which is susceptible or intermediate can be used for the management. We have seen problems with the polymyxins, and we all know that it is important to generate a good AUC by MIC for the polymyxins. Actually, the required target, the target colistin steady state average of 2, that will generate the AUC of 48, and which will correspond to the AUC by MIC of 24 when the MIC is less than 2. If the MIC of the organism is more than 2, then AUC by MIC, this particular target cannot be achieved, and especially if we are dealing with lung infections and if we have resistant organism, then it is difficult to treat with only polymyxins. Again, if there is augmented renal clearance, there is going to be a decline in the probability of achieving this target, and especially if the creat clearance is more than 10, then the probability of achieving this target is less than 18%. The other treatment options which are being discussed in the West, like for example, we have the combinations of Weber-Bactrim, Tazobactam, Relibactam, as well as I mentioned, Ceftazidime-Avibactam, as well as this combination therapy of Ceftazidime-Avibactam with Astronam, as well as Astronam-Avibactam. This will not cover the Acinetobacter at all. So the next options are, what about the Cefiderocol? Yeah. So Cefiderocol is a novel cephalosporin, and in fact the mechanism of action is that it uses the iron, and with this iron it penetrates across the outer membrane to achieve good concentrations inside the periplasmic space, and then subsequently it inhibits the various beta-lactamases. So it will inhibit the beta-lactamases including the NDMs as well as the OXA. So it's a good molecule. It has activity only against the gram-negatives. It has no activity against the gram-positive or the anaerobes. It is indicated predominantly for the UTI or for the pneumonia. So it is not for the bacteremia or for the intra-abdominal infections. And the dose is 2 grams 8 hourly over 3 hours. Now this particular combination, this particular antibiotic along with high dose Sulbactam has shown synergy as well. Coming to another antibiotic, which is the Iravacycline. Iravacycline is the next generation tetracycline, and it evades the resistance mechanisms which confer resistance to minocycline as well as to the tigecycline. So if TG is resistant, maybe Iravacycline can be susceptible, as it is a tetracycline. It has activity against the gram-negatives, gram-positives as well as the anaerobes. The organisms which are not covered are the Pseudomonas, Proteus, Providentia, Morganella, but it has activity against the Acinetobacter baumannii. And in fact, there is a possibility of higher susceptibility to the CRAB or the carbapenem-resistant Acinetobacter baumannii to the Iravacycline. It will be very useful for the intra-abdominal infections because it achieves higher concentration. The toxicity of the Iravacycline is lesser than tigecycline, and it has better pharmacokinetics as well. Coming to another novel drug, which is the aminoglycoside, which is the plazomicin. And what about plazomicin? The mechanism of action is that it binds to the 30S ribosomal subunit, and it has activity against the gram-negatives, aminoglycoside gram-negatives only, MDR and XDR. But it will not have activity against the NDM gram-negative bacteria. So, in our country, where we have NDM in case of Enterobacteriaceae, E. coli, Klebsiella, as well as Acinetobacter. So, this is not really going to be effective. So, not a very good treatment option for the Acinetobacter baumannii infections. So there is another drug which is the Cefepime-Tibactam, which I'm sure a few of us might have used. we had the opportunity to use this particular drug in patient with Klebsiella pneumoniae and in another patient who had HAP with Acinetobacter baumannii along with Klebsiella pneumoniae. Cefepime zidibactam is also, when we talk about the zidibactam is a second generation diazobeta-lactamase inhibitor, and it has several mechanisms of actions. So what it does is that it binds to the penicillin binding protein PBP2 of the Enterobacteriaceae as well as of the Acinetobacter. I will just, because it's stopping a lot of times, I will do that now. No, that's okay. I'll use this. Yes. Yeah. It also synergizes, so it binds to the PBP2 of the Enterobacteriaceae Pseudomonas as well as the Acinetobacter. It will synergize with the cefepime and binds to the PBP3, which is one of the mechanism of resistance for the E. coli. E. coli, as we know, that it is alteration of the PBP3 inserts, which is causing a problem in our country. And of course, it inhibits the beta-lactamases. So the various OXA23, OXA51 of the Acinetobacter as well as the OXA48 NDM are also inhibited by the zidibactam. So it is one of the good treatment options, and it has got synergy with, for Acinetobacter, it has synergy with the Cellbactam. So cefepime zidibactam with Cellbactam has got a synergistic activity for the Acinetobacter baumannii. About this particular option, which is Cellbactam with Dirlobactam. So, how many of us have heard about this? Cellbactam here is not used as a beta-lactamase inhibitor, it is used as a beta-lactam antibiotic, and the beta-lactamase inhibitor here is the Dirlobactam. And it is given as 1 gram 6 hourly of each, the dose is 6 hourly and to be infused over 3 hours. What Cellbactam does is, since it has intrinsic antibacterial properties, it's a penicillin derivative, it binds to the penicillin binding protein 1A, 1B as well as to the PBP3. And Dirlobactam, it is a beta-lactamase inhibitor. It is a potent inhibitor of the class A, C and D, not the metallobeta-lactamases. So that will be a caveat in our country. And then if it is only OXA23 and OXA51, then it can be a good treatment option, but not for the NDMs producing Acinetobacter baumannii. I'm not touching. It's happening on its own. So it's not me. I think we need to go back. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. And in fact, there is this ATTACK clinical trial which was performed, which compared the Cellbactam Dirlobactam versus colistin, and in this, majority of the patients were having HAP and VAP with or without bacteremia, and both the groups also received imipenem as a combination therapy. And here the mortality was 32% in the colistin group versus 19% in the Cellbactam Dirlobactam group. But remember, it has activity only against the OXA23 and 51 and not against the NDM producing Acinetobacter baumannii. So there is definitely an unmet need, especially in our country. And probably we need to discuss another treatment option, which is Cellbactam. We all know that Cellbactam has been advised and used in higher doses of 8 to 12 grams for the treatment of Acinetobacter baumannii. It is a beta-lactam, beta-lactamase inhibitor, and it binds irreversibly to the class A. Since it is a penicillin derivative, it has a cytal activity. The PKPT parameter is the time above MIC, so multiple doses have to be given, more frequently has to be given. It has intrinsic antibacterial activity against the Acinetobacter baumannii, also against the anaerobes. So there is no need to add additional metronidazole when we are using sulbactam. Neisseria moraxella catarrhalis, not so clinically important, but it can also have activity against the Cepacia. What's important to remember that it has a half-life of 11 hours, and that is in patients with creatinine clearance. And when the creatinine clearance decreases, the half-life increases. So the renal dose modification is also recommended when the creat clearance is less than 30 and 50% of dose needs to be reduced or has to be reduced. Here, when the creatinine clearance decreases to less than 30, the T half increases twofold. And if there is both kidney as well as the hepatic dysfunction, then the half-life increases to almost 3.6-fold. The clinical implication is that initially when we are giving it as 6-hourly, with the renal dysfunction, we can give it as 12-hourly or less frequent doses. What about in patients with hemodialysis? So in hemodialysis, more than 50% of the dose gets removed. So when a person is undergoing hemodialysis, we don't give that particular dose at that time, but give the additional dose after the HT. This is important. Now, how do we give that? Done. So, how do we give the sulbactam? Should we give it as loading dose or as prolonged infusions? Prolonged infusions and over how many hours? 3 to 4. It's actually, yes. So 4 hours is recommended. And in fact, this particular pharmacokinetic model has shown that when we are giving it as 4-hour infusions, higher doses, then the probability of target attainment of 60% time above MIC is much higher. So more than 90% can be achieved, the target of 60% time above MIC when 1 gram 6-hourly is given, and this close to 98% can be achieved if the MIC is 8. With the higher MICs, higher doses have to be given. The recommendation is to give 8 to 12 grams in case of Acinetobacter baumannii infections, and in fact all the other the treatment options which we have discussed, synergistic effect has been observed with this particular molecule. It is not that it is free of any side effects. Definitely side effects can occur, especially allergies can occur, and which I have also observed in the clinical practice. Eosinophilia, hypersensitivity, since it's a beta-lactam and probably patients must have taken beta-lactams earlier, then anemia, thrombocytopenia, as well as sometimes hematuria and other side effects also need to be monitored. I think this is my last slide, which is about the treatment option, that for the Acinetobacter baumannii infections, nebulized antibiotics, especially the polymyxins, are not recommended anymore now. And this is probably the suggested workflow, that if we are having if you're seeing a gram negative, it's important to identify whether it's an Enterobacteriaceae or a Acinetobacter or Pseudomonas based on the gram stain or the MALDI-TOF, and then subsequently perform the rapid assays for diagnosing the mechanism of resistance, and based on the mechanism of resistance as well as the species and the organism, we can choose our antibiotics. Polymyxin B combination therapy if it is NDM, Oxa, with sulbactam and the other novel treatment options which are going to arrive in the pipeline. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Nidhi. It was a...
Neha.
Sorry. Yeah. It was a wonderful lecture. I think comprehensively covered how to manage Acinetobacter baumannii infection. I think we have time of a couple of questions.
Yeah, proceeding with that, I would like to invite in our panelist, Dr. Divyadeep Mukherjee sir from the Kolkata sir, please have a seat, sir. Thank you.
So usually, how long you give antibiotics in a severely Acinetobacter baumannii infection, and how you stop it for pneumonias and for bloodstream infections?
So the duration is not really defined for the Acinetobacter baumannii. It will depend upon the clinical microbiological cure. Usually around for bacteremia, we can give around 10 days of therapy, 7 to 10 days of therapy. For pneumonia again, it's around 10 days.
Okay.
It's shorter for the Enterobacteriaceae, but for the Acinetobacter baumannii, longer treatment will be advisable. Yeah, please. So if tigecycline is reported as susceptible, then definitely we can go for the higher doses of tigecycline depending on what is the site of infection. But preferably, I think even that's why I showed that particular case of, it was a non-critically ill patient, and he's not likely to have any alteration in the PKPD as well. But still, tigecycline was not effective. So it is better to go for probably polymyxin B with sulbactam. And in my clinical practice, yes, sulbactam has been sometimes magical.
In vivo, there is a steady state to high dose of ampicillobactam. Do you recommend or do you have a practice of using that?
Yeah, so in the West, ampicillin sulbactam is not available as a standalone. It is only available as a combination of ampicillin and sulbactam. So most of the studies or most of the papers will tell you ampicillobactam, but there is no synergy for Acinetobacter baumannii for ampicillin and using these two drugs together. In fact, we are overloading the patients with the beta-lactams. Ampicillin is not effective for Acinetobacter baumannii, so giving this additional beta-lactam will result in more toxicity. So a stand-alone sulbactam will be better.
Madam, we have a patient of Acinetobacter in CSF culture. So that is MDR Acinetobacter with colistin intermediate sensitive, the report comes. So what is the treatment? Tigecycline is resistant.
Correct. So nowadays, since the susceptibility criteria of colistin has changed, we are not going to see anything which is susceptible. It will be always intermediate. Here, we can, the backbone of course will be your polymyxin colistin. We can use intrathecal colistin for the local higher, and of course we can try with the combination of sulbactam. Tigecycline anyways has a poor CNS penetration, so it is not a treatment option.
The penetration of sulbactam into the CNS, has any study or any literature? Sulbactam.
The CSF, it has a good volume of distribution, so the penetration should also be better. I will need to check, but what I know is that it has a good volume of distribution and good penetration into the tissues.
Ma'am, I have just shared one experience
Yes.
Actually, I had a patient, usually I work in a cancer ICU. So a patient post-operatively comes to me in shock and after goes into abdominal sepsis. And as everywhere in every ICU, there is a combination of ceftazidime, avibactam and aztreonam we take up in the shock patients and all. So after that, whenever it's not working, then we think out of the box. We try to think about CRAB and all, right? So my experience, at least in my hospital, I have been placed with a MLD and BioFire, whatever. So my experience about this CRABs with cotrimoxazole, IV cotrimoxazole actually has been wonderful. So because a patient not improving from shock at a post-operative gram-negative sepsis, ceftazidime, avibactam, aztreonam leaves us essentially two bacteria, usually Acinetobacter and Sternotomonas.
Correct.
And usually cotrimoxazole covers both of it,
Yes.
thankfully in my ICU. So your experiences on the drug, IV cotrimoxazole for CRAB?
So as such, for the Acinetobacter baumannii, in my center, we are not seeing susceptibilities to TMP SMX.
Okay.
But in your center, if you have susceptibility to TMP SMX, then it is a good treatment option. And in fact, for the Stenotrophomonas, it is the drug of choice.
Yes, so that's why
So-
it's a kind of an escape route that covers both.
Yeah,
for me.
absolutely. it's a very good point and very good practical point which you have mentioned. So depending upon center to center, if your center has susceptibilities to TMP SMX for CRAB, then of course it's a good treatment option.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Neha. So there are a few studies here.
Hi.
Yeah. Thank you for the session.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Nupur, consultant Artemis Gurgaon.
Oh,
Yeah.
hi.
Hi. So I've read about a few studies which are upcoming relating to the high dose TG for crab pneumonias. Any experience you would like to share, because considering some studies have shown a higher mortality with the TG pneumonias.
Absolutely. In fact, the IDSA does not recommend tigecycline for the Acinetobacter pneumonias as well.
So, like, your center still has
We're shifting
any
more-
experience with the same? Have you been using a high dose TG, or any one of
No,
the
if
panelists
it's
have been
suppose
using?
like for us, if suppose tigecycline, I mean, we would first want to go for polymyxin B with a high dose sulbactam. That would be preferable. Not the tigecycline. Of course, we are doing when we have used tigecycline and we have seen the failures. We have used it for other site of infections as well. So I would not really prefer a combination of high dose tigecycline with polymyxin B. No, and even the guidance from the IDSA, even from the latest 2023, is not in favor of that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking the question.
Ma'am, I'm Dr. Saurabh from Apollo Guwahati. I had a patient of Acinetobacter, came from outside hospital, pneumonia with bacteremia, same side some scar-like lesion. Patient came on Miro, polymyxin and doxycycline. When we did the bile and blood, patient grew kind of XDR. Patient was only sensitive to CAC, that's ceftriaxone, sulbactam, EDTA. The microbiologist also gave TG in blood sensitive. Cotrimazole was resistant. Sulbactam, they didn't give us the MIC. We started this patient on CAC and high dose sulbactam, 3 gram TDS. Patient was somehow improving on day 7 of inotropes, but had a worsened LFT. I had 2 questions, ma'am. Can we give simultaneously doxycycline with minocycline? Minocycline MIC was 8 in this case. So we though tried minocycline for some point of time. So can we give it combined together? First thing, is it any recommendation of using CAC in case of Acinetobacter medico-legally? Second thing. And third thing is, how long should we consider this sulbactam considering LFT if I have a PDR?
Okay. So we'll take the first one, which is regarding the use of minocycline if the MIC is 8. So the minocycline MIC of 8 is resistant for the Acinetobacter baumannii. If it is resistant, then the chances of achieving a clinical cure are less, right? So technically, and I think as it should not be used. Even the higher dose, because nowadays we are recommending higher dose of minocycline, 200 milligram BD only in the clinical practice, even for treating the other infections like steno, etc. as well. So ideally not. And plus, if suppose you're already having LFT alterations, minocycline will also result or add to the LFT alterations. Second question was regarding the use of ceftriaxone, EDTA, sulbactam, right, medico-legally. I'm not a medico-legal expert, but yes, the centers where we have worked, if it is a limited treatment option, if your microbiology shows that this is susceptible, then you can use it. However, if there is, and here in this case, there was no other treatment option which is available, right? So you have used it on a compassion. Here again, probably it's the sulbactam component which is working. Correct. So, yeah, but there are no susceptibilities criteria either, right? There is no particular breakpoint, neither as per the CLSI or as well as the UCAST. So, and the disc is also provided by the company. So, we don't have well-defined criteria for it, but yes, it is probably the sulbactam component which is working. So, and the third question was, Duration of the sulbactam therapy. Okay, so yeah, so it will depend upon the site of infection, right? Bacteremia. So probably you can use it if suppose there was a good response and your repeat cultures were negative within 3 days, then maybe you can use it for 10 days or so, right? So depending upon the site of infection, 10 days, and depending on how the LFT is performing now. If your LFT is worsening, then you will have to stop it earlier. But probably 7 to... Yes, of course, that's a very good question. Biomarkers can definitely guide us. And in fact, I'm a fan of CRP, not so much of PCT, but CRP can really guide us regarding the duration of therapy as well. Doxycycline, minocycline, both are tetracyclines. So they should not be given together. We should not use drugs of the same class together. It will not have any benefit. It will add to the toxicity.
So I want to ask one thing that as per you have said that TG-cycline is not good choice for a sort of infection in VAP, like right?
Which one?
In VAP, TG-cycline, na?
Huh.
Yeah. So for the Acinetobacter infection, intra-abdominal infections, the post-surgical patients come with that. What will be the choice for in pursuit of colistin and the TG-cycline or a polymyxin V, what the things you choose first going towards in these three criteria, what you will use, colistin, TG, or a polymyxin or a sulbactam. So this is the thing that I want to ask. So in the perspective of post-surgical and intra-abdominal infections.
Correct.
So what is your view in that? Yeah.
So I think in this I will go for a combination therapy of polymyxin with TG-cycline, because TG-cycline achieves a very good intra-abdominal concentration, and in higher doses we should try. Why not only TG-cycline alone? Because we also have to see if it is post-surgical, whether that collection, is there any collection or not? Is this collection localized, or is it also resulting in a subsequent bacteremia? Because sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
We have to conclude now.
thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much for a wonderful lecture and interaction. Thank you, everybody.
On behalf
Thank
of
you,
Pollen
Polan.
Healthcare, we would like to say thanks to one and all of you. And very soon we are going to upload the entire session on our YouTube channel. So please do consider that. I would like to say personally thanks to Dr. Neha Gupta ma'am for nice speaking, and Dr. Anand Nikhalji for being a nice moderator over here. Dr. Divyadeep Mukherjee sir, thank you so much. Thank you so much all the attendees. Thank you.